Cool little video today. A lot of you guys ask about, string winding and setting it up and action and pickup heights and everything going on with the guitar. So I had to put some strings on this. I wanted to clean the fretboard and some tips I could share as far as wrapping the strings up at the headstock to kind of take all the slack out of them, and using some graphite in certain friction point areas to help those strings move and slide in those grooves without binding up. And then also maybe shed a little light on pickup heights and what works and how there is really no rules. It all depends on your setup. So it was just a little help, a little tech video maybe. No real playing in there, but you just get to see the process of stringing it up, and some things I like to do, some just routine maintenance to keep the guitar going 100%. And I think the big topic is going to be the pickup heights and going about setting pickup height and really just making your own sound with your machine. So yeah, dig into the video. Here we go. Guitar maintenance is big. Obviously, if your guitar is running tip-top, you're playing, your notes are going to be tip-top, and it's like a car. If it's well maintained, it's going to run great. I just give the audibly, you can start to hear the strings kind of die out and lose their pop and sensation. But also too, I like to run my finger. I lift the string up, run your finger under the string here, and you can feel all of the dead spots. You can feel the spots where it's contacted the fret, and it's pretty much compacted that string material from playing on that fret so much that it's flat there. So it's not gonna give you a clear ringing tone because it's a dead spot. And I'll go up and down each string, feel it out. Even on the small strings, you can feel it too if they're beat to death. The high E obviously is gonna have more of that, and these are worn out. So we're gonna swap the strings. Tool too, if you can get yourself one of these, it's got the cutters. It's got a bridge pin puller if you need it, and it's got the string winder right here. It's really great. Super, super great tool. But yeah, we're just going to work on getting these strings all off. Over the years, you kind of develop this science or this fast approach to getting strings off, and when you're at a gig and you got to restring really quick, and normally I would do this much faster, but I'm taking my time for the video to walk you guys through what's going on here. Nothing really fun about stepping on one of those when you don't want to, or finding one in your gig bag and running your hands down there. Some people don't. Some people change them out one by one, and that's fine. I'm a fan of getting them all off. They can say it messes with neck tension, but I take them all off at once, and this guitar usually doesn't give me any issues with bouncing back to where it likes to play comfortably. So one of the products I really like to use is this Gorgomite here. Really great for conditioning the fretboard and also cleaning the frets. It's kind of like just like a condensed material cleaner, and I'm really cheap, so I ripped myself off a small square, maybe something like that, something about that size, and I just go down the fretboard and so it just goes to show you what it takes off, and that's the first 3 frets. So that just kind of conditions the board. It gets all that gunk and grime on the edges of the frets, kind of removes that, and you can see what you're doing there. I mean, that piece started off as clean before we started wiping, so that's on your fretboard, so you want to get all that stuff off and just kind of give it a couple of passes. So I'll throw all that back in the package, get that package wrapped back up tight, and get it air sealed, because there is kind of a dampness to the cloth, and you don't want to let that evaporate. So there ends up being this kind of slight film, and I just come in with this rag, this well-conditioned rag that I've used forever, and it's, you know, it doesn't necessarily dry anything out. It just kind of takes that, any of the film left over, and just give that a wipe down. Those, you know, those frets that you try to do such a great job of installing and crowning and rounding, you know, you're keeping them clean. Okay, so one of the other things you can do too to really stay on top of things is just get yourself a number 2 pencil. And I'm not just saying that, it is a number 2. I like to go into the nut slot here where the string is going to ride. It really helps if you put a nice sharp point on the pencil. This is an old trick. Basically the graphite, which they're probably not even graphite anymore, but the graphite in there kind of just acts as a lubricant for the string and allows it to do its thing. Allows it to slide in that groove much easier. So when you're doing those, you know, Hendrix style dive bombs, you can see, you know, there's some of those stuff for sale is that nut sauce and stuff like that. It's really just graphite in a paste, you know, but you can just get away with just doing this, especially if you got a sticky string. Sometimes you can use chapstick. I've done that before, but just kind of get your lead right in there, and it's not, it looks like an eyesore now, but once the strings are on, you really don't notice it. I'll also come into the saddles, and right where the strings ride, see, I have these high-wood saddles on here, so the strings ride in these grooves, and I'll just put some in there too. I'll scratch it all on there too, just to assist it, just to help it out, you know. So at this point now, we'd probably be ready to string up. You know, if I had a pot that was noisy or scratchy, maybe I would lift the guard and spray that out, but all these controls seem to be working just fine. No issues, nothing else to think about, no defects, or, you know, nothing hampering nothing hampering the playability of the guitar. So I can pretty much leave the electronics alone. I'll pass the strings through, and then I'll show you something that I do when I'm tuning up that really does, I feel, help hold the guitar in tune and keep the note solid. Strings of choice. Yeah. Alright, when stringing up the strings, we're obviously at the headstock now. I like to go to the first post. I go 1, 2, and a half. That usually, with a heavy gauge string, will give you 2.5 to 3 wraps. So I'll nip that there. Now, here's another trick that I use to keep the strings, you know, stretched out, keep them in tune, keep the guitar in tune. You load it, string first, into the vintage tuner. Okay, so now you're sitting like that, straight in, okay? I kink it over once, 90 degrees. So now we're laying flat. And then I kink it again this way. So now we have something like that. So now when I string that up, that's already bent into the shape that I want, the area that I want to go. And I just guide that wrap with my finger. I don't put it in the nut yet. I kind of just do the most I can outside of So now you've stretched the most, you know, you've stretched it in, you've stretched it down, and you've stretched it around. So you've taken the majority of the slack out. So when you're done stretching this string, it shouldn't stretch on you anymore. And you can see I have 1, 2, 3 wraps around that post. And we have a string stretched all the way in there. And you go down, and then you come around. So you're basically, you know, kinking it 2 times down, and it forms the shape of the string, the tuner post. And then, like I said, you just twist it up, and the string will usually stay where it needs to go. And then you don't got to worry about the string flying around everywhere while you're trying to wrap it up. No issues with that because it's already sort of bent to fit where it wants to be. Okay, so when you get to one of these strings, you know, you want to go 2.5, but you don't really have that. So you know this is your hole that you're going into. You got your 1, come around there, you go 2, and then halfway would be about there. So I'm still using the original posts that are there. I'm measuring off of those posts, but what I'm doing is just extending it or factoring in, you know, where it may lay down. Mike Hickey, Joe Bonamassa's guitar tech, made a good point too when stringing up a Stratocaster or any other guitar is you don't really want to feed the string into the nut and do it that way, because essentially while you're tightening it, you're cutting through that bone nut. You know, you're cutting through the nut here, and you're kind of, the string getting winded and getting pulled is kind of doing extra where it doesn't need to take material off that nut. It may be finite and you may never see it, but it's still taking material off. So that was a great tip. An old Danny Gatton trick I read is that he wouldn't trim the high E string, and he would wrap it fully on the post to keep as many windings down on the string as he could to keep it from moving. But I feel like, you know, I'm no Danny Gatton and he's a genius, but I feel like this method of kinking it twice it kind of does the same thing. You know, you get enough wraps on this to where you're not going to have an issue. Your end result will look like that, all strung up. I'll stretch these out now, tune this up, and I'll show you a couple other things. Believe it or not, laying the guitar down like this is not really a way you want to put it in tune, because the weight of the neck, you know, the tune will change if the guitar is in the playing position, and that's truly how it should be tuned in. But I'll get it close laying down like this, you know, so I can watch everything. I do have a snark tuner at the headstock. I'll get everything tuned to pitch. Alright, now stretching is big too. You know, obviously we're trying to get all of the extra slack out of the string, so when we tune this guitar up and we make bends and we play, it stays in tune. So I like to, you know, there's many ways you can do it. You can do this method where you hold it, you know, up at the 1st or 2nd fret and give it a good pull. I do that a lot. But also, you know, a great way to stretch is after you stretch, always tune it back up. Another way is facilitate, you know, or recreate what you're going to do with the guitar. So we're going to bend, right? So take the strings like this and, you know, create false bends. What we're going to do, we're going to bend these strings. We're going to play licks. We're going to, you know, try to bend to the moon. We're going to practice our Albert King and all that stuff. So just, you know, recreate the bends you do. Last final one. Also, you know, work the whammy bar. You know, you want to the note is still sharp a little bit, so that's a good sign. That means that the string needs a little more stretching. So you just come in there. Okay, that part's done. So another big thing too with Stratocasters and setting them up is, you know, and I do set my high E string up a little higher. At the 12th fret, my high E string is at about 120. The higher action is just comfortable for me. And, you know, yeah, checking everything now, it's at about 110. And to me, that's pretty comfortable. I'll try to give you guys a look into what I'm talking about. So, great string action rule here. You just come in at the 12th fret and, you know, we get about 110, maybe 120 on the high E. About 100, 100, 100. That's just been comfortable, you know what I mean? It is fairly high, but, you know, that's just what's worked for me, and I feel more comfortable there. All right, so I'm going to try to explain pickup height in the best way possible. Think about the strings, first of all, okay? You have a fatter, wider string up at the top, right? And you have the thinner, sonically quieter string down below, okay? So most tweakers and Strat guys, you'll see their pickups kind of, you know, most guys, you'll see their pickups at an angle like this. Now, the reason for that is the volume that this string is going to put out is going to be a lot more than this thinner string. Also, the amount of vibration that this string makes is going to be a lot more than this, okay? So what I like to do for my setup is drop the bass side of the pickups. Now, I know that there's, you know, Stu Mac has their suggested pickup height settings, but nobody knows the specs of the pickups you're using, and every single coil pickup is made different. I don't care if it's an old one, if it's a new one. There are great pickup builders out there, and they'll tell you the same thing. It's extremely hard to recreate another pickup. You can get close, but they all have, there's so many factors in there, being the flat work, the inductance, the capacitance, the way it was wound, the wrap, the magnets, the amount of magnetism it has, the Gauss, whatever, you know, there's so many other things to factor in, you know, to make a dead-on replica pickup. So what I do is I'll get all of these set up. So the three of them give me three individual tones. I get a noticeable neck pickup tone, I get a mid pickup tone that stands out, and I get a bridge pickup that stands out. So I have three different tones. I'm like, you know, when you click in a position, if you weren't watching a video, you could say, oh yeah, he's definitely on the bridge pickup. So I do that and get three distinct sounds. Then what I do is basically go into the neck and find where it may be muddy or where it may need more clarity. And if it's a little muddy on the low strings, I'll bring this down. And it's just basically loosening this screw. Loosening this screw will just drop this pickup. If I find that it's a little weak on the lower strings, I'll bring it up. Or I may not, judging by the sound of these other two. Because, again, in the end, they all have to work together. You don't want one pickup to be strong and one to sound weak, you know. That's why you'll notice my bridge pickup here is a little higher. You know, you have the neck and middle looking very similar, but then the bridge pickup is quite high. Because my bridge pickup only reads about 4.5K. Which doesn't really mean anything. There probably could be a break in the winding, but it's just a really fat, powerful pickup in that position where it's set. So there's a lot of tone, there's a lot of variables in adjusting pickups, and then we always want our high strings to be balanced, but to cut and give us our clarity without being too touch sensitive. You know what I mean? Touch sensitivity is a great thing for guys that are playing plugged straight in, and some of them may have their pickups up very, very high. But also, it can hamper you in a way where you don't get that room to breathe underneath the string. So if I want to adjust pickups, I'll basically just bring these individuals up until they're balanced. So I still get my three distinct sounds from three different pickups, but also this note, or these three notes in the bridge, don't overpower these three notes in the neck or these three notes in the middle, and vice versa. That works for all three of those. So there's a little insight into, you know, pickup heights, and there is no set of rules. Don't let anybody tell you what your measurements are supposed to be. That you should be able to explore that and mess with that on your own and really find your sound. That's what I found has worked, and that's what works for me. And most guys out there, you know, they spend some time adjusting pickups, and you know, look at some of those old Austin City Limits videos of Eric Johnson. You can really see his pickup setup there. It's pretty cool to see him bringing the bridge pickup way up, and you know, just to balance out with the other pickups. It's really great. I spent a lot of time with pickup height, and when I use a fuzz face, I tend to like these a little lower. And even with my action as high as it is, I like to keep the pickups at the heights that they're at. There you go. There's a great view of how I'm setting them up. Straightness of the neck itself. Recently, last week, I kind of straightened the neck till it had no relief in it. It was just it was pretty straight all the way across. Lowered my action some, obviously, because you're straightening the neck. So instead of the neck being, you know, concave, you're now getting it so it's straight over. So the strings are going to come down because you're straightening that out. It was fun, and I really liked what it did, but it just wasn't comfortable for me to play. So I added a relief in there. You know, I turned the truss rod nut counterclockwise and kind of loosened the neck and let it swing up a little bit. Not too much, maybe about 8 to 10 thousandths at the most. Some guys like that, some guys don't. I just prefer it. I like the string to ring out without rattling and just do its thing, you know. And I like that real big rubber band kind of hollow feeling. That's a little trick for the guys using high action. You know, you put a little bit of relief in the neck and everything works out for you. Or it's supposed to. So there's 3 E's at the 12th fret. You know, a well-intonated guitar is really going to perform well for you. Research intonation, you know what I mean? You want to play an open note, and then you want to play that same note at the 12th fret, and you want to see what it does. And if it's sharp or flat, you want to make your adjustments here at the saddle. I talked about this in a video I did on these Highwood saddles, so you can go back and refer to that if you need some help as far as adjusting intonation. But yeah, I mean, there's me just restringing this old Strat, tuning it up, stretching those strings to get all of that slack out of there, keeping it in tune, and that's what I do. I try to stay on top of this guitar because it's my favorite, and it plays and it's got the sound I want. It's never let me down, and I just love this guitar. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys can use some of these tips when your own Stratocaster setup. Peace.